Hello and welcome. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I hope all of you have been enjoying all of our sessions. The become a board member and then become influential, and we have to say that it's been a great day. Lots of amazing sessions. Oh, sorry, I see a team member saying it's a black screen. Hold on. I'm gonna fix that. Can you hear me? No, can't hear me. Okay, you can hear me. Great. All right, I'm going to continue going. If you can't hear me, that's okay. If you can't see me, that's okay. So we wanted to really create the space for people who have been on this journey with us to present and share their expertise. The following sessions were among hundreds submitted and were the finalists that were selected from after thousands of votes and after careful consideration by the FFA team. I'm proud to give you our community-led programming. And first up is Ashima Sharma. Take it away, Ashima.
Thank you so much, Divya. We're going to go ahead and get my screen going, and that way we can get into the goodness here. Let me know, Divya, if you can see my screen here.
I can.
Awesome. Let's get into it. First of all, thank you so much. I feel very honored that we were selected among the hundreds of presentations and by thousands of you. And I could talk about this topic for hours, but I'm going to go ahead and really try and constrain myself here and squeeze it all in into 15 minutes. So the topic for this presentation is about mentorship. And really the title is Get Yourself a Mentor. So before we actually even get into the topic of mentorship and best practices and goal setting, I actually want to hear from all of you. So in the chat, if you're able to, I would love to hear about your experience with mentorship, whether, if you've ever had a mentor or maybe if you haven't and why you would like one. And as we get your responses in, we're going to proceed forward with my experience with mentorship. So for those of you who may work in product development, you may notice that I applied a little bit of a product development framework to how I look at my career. I like to call it my career development lifecycle. So we're going to go back to 2010, 2014, that time period, a little bit ways away, where I was kind of in that discovery phase of my career, right? I was just figuring out what I wanted to do, figuring out what would be right for me, and really just testing out the waters. At that time, I decided that chemical engineering would be the right path for me, with very limited feedback and very limited knowledge of what that would do for me. But at the same time, remember that this was kind of that discovery phase where you may not have that much data. And at that time, my experience with mentorship was extremely, extremely limited. In fact, I didn't really have any mentors during that time period. So let's fast forward now to the first job, which is really the MVP, the minimum viable product of my career, where I worked as an engineer at Chevron out in Bakersfield, for those of you who are familiar with that town in California. And this is the first iteration, right, of what my career could be. I was just now getting my experience with engineering, really understanding if this would be the right career path for me. And to be honest, I was assigned a mentor during that time, but the key phrase there was assigned. To be honest, that mentorship relationship didn't really last that long. And I really started to proceed through the next few years of my career on my own, which now brings us to the iterate phase. So anytime you're developing a product, you get that first version out, you get some feedback, and you start to iterate depending on what the feedback is telling you. And that's the same thing that we all do with our career, to be fairly honest. And at that iterate stage, that was actually a pretty monumental stage in my career, because to be honest, this is when I truly felt stuck. To explain it a little bit more, there was a point in my career where 3 years into being an engineer, I suddenly had this realization. It was quite a stark realization that maybe the career path that I was heading on may not be right for what I wanted. And that can be a really tricky feeling. For any of you who are listening right now or listening to a recording, if you relate to that feeling of being stuck, it's a really, really difficult feeling because you don't know what's right for you. You know, your current situation may not be correct, but you don't know where to go next. And this was the time where I said, okay, well, if I don't really know what I want to do with my career and all these years I spent into it may not be the right thing for me, maybe I can try to seek out mentorship. And this is where my experience with mentorship really became a very eye-opening experience. I went on LinkedIn, like many of us do, trying to look for individuals who may have the career path that I'm looking to pivot into or a similar career path. And I reached out to hundreds of people during that time. And recently I looked back to see actually how many of them replied, and I actually got 0 responses. I'm not even exaggerating. I didn't get any response for my outreach in finding that mentor. And that started a cycle of feeling stuck and feeling lonely and not knowing how to navigate my career. And so we can actually take a step back now. Now that I'm a few years later, I can take a step back and start to actually do a little bit of a retrospective on what went well, what could have gone better, and what will I try next. So let's break this down a little bit. I knew that I needed to make a change during that time where I was pivoting my career, trying to figure out what was next for me. And I tried to take action towards that change. So let's give myself a thumbs up on that. But really, let's get into what could have gone better. This is going to be a recurring theme throughout this presentation, but really what could have gone better was getting clear on what my goals were and actually learning how to ask for help more directly and identifying what I needed help for. You'll learn that this is really crucial actually when you're seeking out mentorship. And at that time, I had no idea what this actually meant for me. So what will I actually try next? Really, it comes down to writing down my goals and clearly determining the gaps I need to fill. And we'll walk through a framework to help you out with that. But really, there was a mindset shift that I had to make as well, which was leaving behind this notion that I needed to accomplish everything on my own. Some of you may be able to relate to that sort of mindset where you feel like you have to prove to everybody what you can accomplish. And to me, it was very difficult actually when I realized I needed that mentorship to actually seek it out, because I thought for some reason I had to navigate my career on my own and prove to everyone what I could do, which is completely an inaccurate mindset. And then lastly, one thing that still felt like a mystery during that time was finding a mentor who has invested in me and can support me in achieving those goals. And we'll actually walk through some of those best practices so that it doesn't feel like a mystery for all of you. And really the ramifications of not having a mentor, now that I can look back pretty clearly and understand what that actually did for my career, really what it meant was that I had many, many, many blind spots. And I feel confident that some of you can relate to that as well, right? Whether you're looking to pivot your career or get into leadership or start your own company, whatever it may be, there are so many blind spots when you're trying to navigate it on your own and you don't have that mentor to help you, whether it's around salary ranges or titles or RSUs, whatever it may be. It can be a pretty detrimental effect of not having someone to guide you there. And in fact, 60% of individuals actually don't have a mentor today. So let's actually then get into how we can start to solve this and what can help. But I think we need to cover some basics first, getting into just some clear definitions, right, of the differences between a coach versus a mentor versus a sponsor. Some of you may have heard those terms being thrown around, and I actually do see them as 3 distinct resources. So covering the coach first, really how I see it is that is someone who generally is hired to help you with a very, very, very specific skill. And generally it is the coach who's really driving that relationship, providing those exercises, keeping you accountable. Getting into the mentor, which I think is something that everyone really should be seeking out, that's really where, a mutual relationship actually between a mentor and a mentee, where the mentee is driving that relationship with their goals in mind. And ideally, this is a long-term relationship that could last over decades if it's a great one. And then lastly, a sponsor. This can be quite rare in the workplace, unfortunately, but this is going to be someone who's higher up in leadership who can really advocate for you in the room when you're not there, to advocate for those promotions or for you to get that next opportunity. So with the focus being on mentorship today, let's actually get into how a mentor can actually help. Remember how I was talking about those blind spots that I had? Well, let's actually talk about what a mentor could have done for me during that time. Number one is definitely learning from their mistakes. I think this is one of the most important aspects of having a mentor, someone who's been there, done that, maybe made a few mistakes along the way, and they can tell you what they learned from it. There's so much value in being able to gain that expertise from someone who has gone through that experience, and maybe you can avoid those mistakes down the line. Understanding what resources help them, right? There's so many educational resources, trainings, whatever it may be, but really understanding what resources actually help them achieve a similar goal that you may be looking to achieve. The third one is getting that second point of view on decisions or obstacles. So, coming back to that, myth that you have to navigate your career on your own, really what you should be doing is collecting as much data as you can and as much information as you can, just as you would in product development, or even if you're in an analytical role, making sure that you're getting the right information to make the right decisions. And someone's learned experience can be an excellent way of anecdotal data to do so. And then lastly, expanding your network. As you proceed through your career, no matter what you end up doing, really that network really starts to pay off. No matter if you're just starting off your career or getting into, a high leadership position. So now the golden question is, okay, that sounds great. I already recognize that mentorship is really necessary. And I already know all this, Ashima. Well, okay, let's go into where to start looking. I've lined out a few options. I won't say this is completely exhaustive, but these are some first steps to start looking for mentors. The first one can be work. There is a lot of value in seeking out mentorship from either colleagues or leaders that you've worked with in the past who already know you and they know your work and they know who you are, and there's no need to start from square one. And there could be a lot of value in seeking out mentors at work. Now, I do realize that's not always an option for everyone. If we think back to my personal example, right, where I was looking to completely pivot out of the industry that I was in, it really wasn't an option to seek out that mentorship at work itself. But for some people, that can be a really easy first place to start if you have a great work environment. So let's line out some other options then. Communities. Now, especially during COVID, the power of communities has truly exploded. We're a part of a really powerful one right now at this conference. Really start to tap into communities and seek them out. And what I mean by communities, this could be professional associations, this could be very niche interest groups, whatever it may be, but communities have exploded recently. Conferences. A conference like this is a perfect example to start networking and develop those potential mentorship relationships, whether it's through the speed networking feature. But conferences really bring together a diverse group of individuals who have different life paths, and that could be an excellent way to start finding those mentors. And then lastly, definitely tap into your alumni groups. There's already that bond of being part of the same alumni association, having familiar memories. And again, there's more likelihood of a potential mentor wanting to mentor someone from their same alma mater. So we got to talk through a few ways of where to look for those mentors, but I want to go a step further of how to actually approach someone to mentor you. And now there's probably a million different approaches to do this, but here's my approach. I do like to keep it more casual and organic. That those do tend to be, better likelihood of someone wanting to help you and get on that first call and mentor you. So I provided a template if someone would like to use it. Something casual like, hey, I'm a fellow FFA attendee and I was looking for some advice. It would be great to grab virtual coffee for 30 minutes. One thing I do recommend, and we'll get into this, is making sure you have that clear goal or agenda in mind. I noticed you moved into leadership. I was looking for guidance on what resources you used. And then always say thank you. It's really, really important to express that gratitude. So let's get into that goal setting framework. I think what's incredibly important for great mentorship relationships is having that clear goal. So I provided a little template of really trying to get clear about how to set those goals. What do you want to achieve and by when? Why do you want to achieve this goal? How will you start? And what gaps do you need to fill to achieve this goal? Feel free to screenshot it if you need to. And I actually went through and provided a little bit of an example of a goal that I had a year ago, actually, and how I was thinking about, how I want to achieve it. So my goal was I wanted to be a people leader by, let's say, 2022 Q2. I truly enjoy developing and growing a team. That was my why, and that why has to be strong. And how I'm going to do this is I need to first vocalize this to my manager so that they're even aware. That's step one that I needed to do. And the gaps that I needed to learn was how to prioritize ruthlessly, because that's a critical skill. So hopefully this framework helps to get a little bit more clear on those goals if you feel a little bit unclear. And then lastly, to top this off, some golden tips. So these are not all of them. I've only did a few, but for mentees, get clear on those goals, not on your problems. Come to each session with a clear objective/agenda, and keep your mentor updated on your progress, even if there are roadblocks. I promise you, they still want to hear from you. And I actually provided golden tips for mentors because I think at any point of your career, you're capable of being a mentor yourself, and you should be one, even if you're seeking out that mentorship. So mentorship is about trust, and active listening is critical. Get to know your mentee's goals and share yours too. And mentors, be a multiplier. Share those resources, contacts, introductions, frameworks, whatever it may be. And lastly, to just seal this all off, as I know I'm reaching the end of my time slot, one thing I always just remind myself, because this is what my name means in Sanskrit, is that I'm limitless and that together we're limitless. And so anytime you may feel stuck, just remind yourself of the power of that word and what you can achieve. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashima. All right. Up next, we have Julie Schehter here to help us.
Drop out of the Zoom.
Oh, yeah, I see you, Julie. All right, Julie, you're here. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Divya. I'm so glad to be here. I am Julie Schehter, the CEO and co-founder of Small Packages, and we are a relationship building company. So we have curated care packages for all different life events, from birthdays to new babies, to make the gifting part of connection easier. And we are now also building an app to make it easier for folks to maintain the entire life cycle of their relationships. And I'm here today to talk about pivots, because obviously if you are involved in entrepreneurship in any way, you know that pivots are the lifeblood of being an entrepreneur, and we have to be incredibly comfortable with those and get used to not only navigating them, but landing them beautifully. And so my career and life have been marked by an enormous number of pivots. And I'll just sort of walk through those very quickly so you all can see what I mean. I started out my professional life as a ballet dancer, and then took a hard left turn into law. Went to Harvard Law School and practiced as a corporate attorney for several years before deciding that, that wasn't the long-term career path for me. I left law and went into entrepreneurship and founded my first company, which was based on ballet. It was called Fit Ballet, a fitness startup in New York City. Ran that for several years, then left that and became a relationship coach, working with folks in law and in tech. And then decided that based on what I had seen, I wanted to found my second company, which is Small Packages, which brings us up to today. So all along all those pivots along the way, I kind of narrowed in on 4 sort of big pillars every single time I made one of those pivots, whether it was in larger life or in entrepreneurship, 4 kind of like really big questions that I needed to get the answers to every time. So I'm going to kind of talk through those. And they are, how do you land on a new idea? How do you find and validate that new idea? How do you find product market fit? How do you make sure it's good? How do you decide the people side of it? Whether to go solo, to find a co-founder. And then, of course, the thing that everybody's always thinking about, money, right? How do I fund this idea? So I'm going to kind of walk through what I've learned in those like 4 big questions. But of course, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. And I'm super glad to address those as well. I'm happy to make this interactive. So going back to that first big question of how do you find and validate an idea? So the first thing I would say there is, start with something Both times I founded a business, I started with something that was a deep well of personal knowledge for me. So with my first company with Fit Ballet, I was basing it on my background as a ballet dancer. With Small Packages, I had a professional background as a relationship coach in order to build upon. And the reason I think that's really crucial is, not only does it have to be something that you care about very, very deeply, but also when you are maneuvering in the entrepreneurship world, of course, folks are going to want to vet your credentials, and it's incredibly helpful to have something to rely upon in order to validate that you are the person that is going to be successful in bringing that business to market. The second thing I would say is to pick an arena that you are intensely and deeply curious and passionate about. I view that as different than something you know a lot about, right? You might know a lot about an arena, but kind of be, not too enthusiastic about it, pursuing it for a long time. And the reason for that is, there's so much along the way that sort of tears us away from the actual substance of our business. As everybody listening, I'm sure knows, the taxes and sort of all of the other things that are ancillary to the actual running of the business. So I found you need a powerhouse of passion in order to get through that part of it. The second pillar, the second big question of, how do I find product market fit? What I've learned there is that customer research is your absolute best friend. There is a framework called Jobs to be Done that I have found really helpful to return to time and time again to make sure I'm asking the right questions of myself and also of potential users of a product in order to validate that product market fit. And what that looks like is you conduct a user interview as though you are conducting documentary research. So you're asking a potential user or a user of your product to kind of walk through and give you answers, not to leading questions, but instead to questions like about their frame of mind when they're thinking about using a product. What are they hiring this product to do? And that framework has been incredibly helpful to me along the way. The second thing I would say there is test increasing levels of commitment when vetting new product ideas. So what I mean there is, doing these customer interviews, like the Jobs to be Done, but then asking potential users to give you increasing levels of commitment. So the first one might be, a verbal yes, I would absolutely use this. Then it might be, will they exchange their email? Will they sign on to an email waitlist? Will they give you will they sign up for a pre-order for the product or the service before it hits market? Will they pay for that pre-order like in a crowdfunding situation? And that's been incredibly helpful just to sort of see as you progress along that journey and getting something to market, the passion with which a customer will respond to it. That third big question, right? The people question. Do I want to go it alone as a solo founder, or do I want to bring someone along on this journey with me? When I'm making that piece of the pivot, where do I want to land? So one of the things that I always think about there is the skill set of the person that you're thinking about bringing on, if you are going to bring someone on, has to be complementary to yours. And I think often we look for folks who remind us of ourselves when we're embarking on, the sometimes scary journey that is entrepreneurship. But in fact, the opposite is necessary. So in Small Packages, which I started by myself, but then brought on my co-founder, Monica Shaw, I was looking for somebody who was a complete, I'm not going to say opposite because we do share some wonderful characteristics, but somebody who could be my complement. So where I would sort of be excited to tackle everything, she would be intelligently conservative about what we actually could fit in given the time and the money that we needed in order to get somewhere. So complementary skill sets, I would say, is super, super crucial there. When you're bringing somebody on who has that complementary skill set, one thing I would say there also is get them to tell you what success looks like. So people often say, hire people who are smarter than you and then get out of their way, which I absolutely believe in. But the idea is if they're smarter or if they have competencies in areas that you don't, how will you know if they are a success in the arena that you're entrusting them with? And so what I've found to be really helpful is to ask them ahead of time, how will we know? How will we know that what you're taking on is a success in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year? What would you like to have accomplished? And that's, of course, not to say that every single one of those metrics has to be hit in order for it to be a success, but it gives you, as someone who might not be super familiar with that arena, some metrics that you can help measure by. And then the last piece, which is fundraising and how to fund an idea, how to fund a pivot. So I'm going to kind of break this down into some component parts. And the one that I will start with is bootstrapping. So this is what I did for my first business, for Fit Ballet. And I've found that it's most helpful for service-based businesses. And the reason that I've found that to be true is that you're really investing and betting on your own time, right? And so you can, for example, as I did with Fit Ballet, you can, have a particular class schedule that you are teaching, that you are marketing, and that is something that you can go out and market and teach. And then there isn't necessarily a deep investment of funding in it. And so that can be really, really helpful. The second piece is crowdfunding. And that I've seen be extremely helpful with product-based businesses. And that's true for two kind of reasons. So when I was starting Small Packages, I launched it on iFund Women, which is a wonderful organization that I will happily shout out. And if anybody in the audience is thinking about using them, more than happy to answer any questions at all about that. But the reason that crowdfunding is so fantastic for product-based businesses is that the reward structure lines up completely and beautifully for product-based businesses. So the way that we did it with Small Packages was we structured the rewards to be the product that we wanted to bring to market. So if you pledged a certain amount, you would get a small box. If you pledged a certain additional amount, you would get a large box, etc. And that meant before we did anything where we had to invest capital, ordering inventory or anything like that, we knew exactly what we were going out to do. We knew exactly what to order, et cetera. And then of course had the capital in order to execute on that. The next piece is grants. I know folks kind of talk often about the fact that, grants are hard to find and they take a lot of time to apply for. And of course, that's definitely true. But in addition to just being non-dilutive capital, which is a really exciting thing, they also are a fantastic piece to put on your resume. And that, I think, is the piece that people often forget about grants, that you can say also you are a fellow or a grant recipient of some, wonderful organization. And that can be wonderful. And then the last little piece, as I know I'm running out of time here, is, of course, raising capital in the angel or venture environment. And my one piece of advice there would be get on Twitter long before you think that you might need to raise capital, and just start observing relationships, start following people, etc. That has been the platform that I've seen be incredibly, incredibly helpful, much more so than, doing your research just online and checking people out there. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julie. And with that, I will welcome on stage Erayna.
Hello, everyone. Excited to wrap up the day, or close to it, after going behind these lovely ladies. So excited to talk about one of my favorite topics, burnout. How timely. So today we're going to talk about the cheat codes for burnout relief, that is. So I'm going to share my screen and share a few slides, but this should be pretty entertaining, because we want to make sure that this is fun and always interesting, because it's been a long day, I think, for everybody. So, and there we go. Hopefully everyone can see it, I believe. Divya, feel free to come off of mute if not, but I believe we should be good to go.
You're good.
Awesome. So as I said, I'm Erayna Sargent. We're talking about the cheat codes to burnout relief. This wonderful topic that is a top of headline and top of mind for leaders and individuals around the world. So a little bit about me and why we are talking about this today. So I built my career in brand management and innovation. So I worked in consumer goods, in tech, and in workspace design and office furniture. Never did I think that would come back into my life. And so throughout this process, I had my own personal bouts of burnout. And what I learned was, one, beating it was easier said than done. And two, I was far from alone. And so I started on this journey of entrepreneurship really to help other high-performing individuals really understand burnout, what they can do about it, and get them on their way to support that they deserve. So I'm the founder of Hooky Wellness. Yes, like play hooky. We will get into that a little bit later as well. Hooky is all about comprehensive and practical burnout relief that blends design thinking with the world of mental wellness. So excited to give you a glimpse of this today. So as I said, we're getting into the cheat codes. So a couple things to know about cheat codes. One, you need to understand the game. And this game is the game of burnout by, as I say, Life Productions. And it's funny that I use this metaphor because I am actually not a gamer. By no means. Occasionally, my husband and I will play Mortal Kombat. That's the one that I play. He's trying to get me to understand it. And we started to look at all of these cheat codes in a matter of, oh, this player can do these things in these environments. And so that really spoke to me from a matter of burnout. Because one, you need to understand the game. What is going on? And with burnout, it is not the same for everyone, nor is every episode of it the same for an individual. And there's a ton of papers out there that can help you understand it. But once again, this is really to get into the relief part, because there's a lot of, oh, burnout happens in the workplace. People are feeling exhausted. People are feeling disconnected. And so understanding what game, quote unquote, game is going on for you is really step one. What are those symptoms and signs that are starting to show up in your life? What are some of those drivers that might be creating these conditions? That is fundamentally the way to start. To understand what you can do about it is to understand what is going on. Then the other part is understanding the player. And when I say that, hint, hint, that's you. So what are some of those natural tendencies that you might have? What are some of those natural reservations that you might have? So if you know that when you are feeling stressed, you might pull away from others, that is something to be aware of, because that is something that can be amplified with the burnout experience. If you know that you are one that it's difficult for you to ask for help, that's another thing for you to know. So understanding yourself and self-awareness is a fundamental part of getting through the path of burnout relief. So understanding the game and understanding the player, really a good start. Then when you think about cheat codes, I'm going to break down some quick basics. So one, these are cheat codes, not silver bullets. In a lot of conversations that I have, individuals and organizations are looking for a silver bullet. I think what we've learned over the past 2 years is burnout is not that simple. It is not a take this pill and it goes away. It is not a just change this one condition. And similarly with cheat codes, you have to understand what is the order in which you press the buttons. What are the situations? Because at some point you might be too close to another player to do it, or the game might not be set up where you can use that in this stage. And so similarly, cheat codes are different and they take some time. Two, as I said, it's game and player specific. You'll see in this background, if there are some gamers out there, I use Mortal Kombat throughout because it really shows you how many different combinations they are, really depending upon who is playing. Three is that you really have to practice in order to master them. This is not something that the cheat codes don't work for themselves. You need to understand how to actually set up the conditions and to use those tips and tricks accordingly. So you have to practice it to master it. There is a matter of proactiveness that needs to come in, both with gaming as well as when it comes to burnout relief. 4 is really about it being a situational use. I alluded to this earlier. There are certain combinations that you can use when you're up close to a player, versus there are some that need to be used when they're all the way across the screen. So for burnout, things that may fall into the camp of your lighter levels of self-care, which we'll talk about that, those may not work in the more intense stages, or they will not do as much quote unquote damage or support. So thinking about it in that terms of it's not one and done. It is a test and learn type of situation that you want to make sure that you're keeping top of mind, because there's not a right and wrong way necessarily. It is up to you, the situation you are in, and being able to find that right combination. And then last is that it may make the game temporarily harder. One of the cheat codes that we'll talk about is really in the growth area. So that's what sometimes for those of you who are in therapy, you might understand that sometimes it doesn't make things easier in the short term. It makes it more of a long-term change. And so ironically, what I learned with cheat codes, there are some cheat codes that actually make it harder within the game itself. But it all is to help you along that journey and to still get you to the end and to the prize. So what are these cheat codes? I keep talking about it. So these cheat codes align with the 4 pillars of mental wellness. And you can learn more about it with the Global Wellness Institute. We did some great white papers with the Mental Wellness Initiative specifically on this. So these are evidence-based. These are data-backed pathways to wellness. So the first one is the growth pillar. Growth is all about proactive efforts in personal development and brain health. So this is a space where you'll see therapy falling into. You'll see coaching. You will see diet and nutrition. You will see other things like neurotropics and things that can help with the brain development. It helps you go in and it helps you understand what is going on the internal. So that's the growth pillar, or the growth part of that cheat code. Next, we have rest. So rest is truly about it. So yes, you have it in the most literal sense of sleep, but that's all about rest, recovery, and rejuvenation. I like to say that space is about letting your brain breathe. So when you think about mindfulness, meditation, things like sensorial type of experiences, so your sound baths fall in here, aromatherapy, those things fall under the rest pillar and that rest part of the codes. So there are times where your brain is overwhelmed and you just need to take a break. So any of those things, once again, mindfulness, meditation, aromatherapy, sound baths, those are things that fall into rest. The next one is really about play. So it is one of my favorite parts of it, and it is literally about play. So this is fun and mental stimulation, self-expression, mastery of new things. So there's really a role for hobbies in your life. And what typically happens when people get into the further stages of burnout is they pull away from those things that bring them joy, because they are responding and typically doubling down on doing more work. And so if you find yourself in those situations where you're pulling away from the things that bring you laughter, the things that make you smile, the things you used to do in your quote unquote free time, those are flags to bring them back, because those things matter. There are actually studies that talk about when you do things like playing a game, even literally playing a video game, it can help your brain connect and communicate different ways. So if you find yourself getting bogged down and super cloudy, which is a very, very common space in burnout, go literally take a break and play a game. Pick up a coloring book. Go play hopscotch. I am big on go get some chalk and go play outside, especially before the weather changes. So play has a very important role in our lives. And as adults, we so often step away from them. The last piece of this pillar is community. So community is huge. This is all about connection and meaning. This could be connection in the literal sense to friends and family. It can also be to a greater purpose or being. So things like spirituality fall into that. You see volunteering falling into that. The whole space around nature and getting back outdoors, that falls into community. And so that really helps to counteract a natural inclination or symptom of burnout, which is pulling away and getting very insular and isolated. So if you find that that is happening, community, whether it be you want to get back in touch with animals, you want to get back in touch with people, you want to just get out into nature. So that is where the community piece comes in. And then the last one to add on to these pillars of really like a booster is what I'd call it, is the rebel button. So it's a little dose of disruption. And with that, when you are dealing with burnout relief, we are really working to decondition hustle culture, because we, and I fall into this space with you as well. We've been conditioned to believe that taking a break or getting rest or playing even is child's play, is a waste of time, is a waste of your energy, is counterproductive. And so that rebel button is what you need to press when you find yourself in a space of negative self-talk and telling yourself, oh, there's so much work to do. How could you take a break? You don't deserve it. That's what happens when it's a matter of you're feeling yourself getting overwhelmed and you're doubling down and work and just adding more things onto your plate and not practicing creating and honoring your boundaries. So that rebel button is that thing that allows you to give yourself permission to use the rest of these cheat codes as needed, because you feel it and you feel the need for it, even if you haven't articulated those words. So once again, the cheat codes are really tied to the 4 pillars of mental wellness. That's growth, rest, play, and community. And then the rebel button is your booster. So how do you know how to use it? And of course, this is not a diagnosis, as you can probably tell, but this really can help you start to frame out and think about different approaches. So these are tied to the different stages of burnout. And so in the early stages, that's where you might be that's where you will be dealing with exhaustion is really starting to pop up at that beginning. You might start to see some early aches and pains that are unexplained in your body. Those are typically early signs. And the thing about exhaustion, it's not just, oh, I'm tired. It is a matter of no amount of sleep is starting to refill you and get you back to where you are used to being. Most of community is at least in that stage. Most of the world is further down this path. So in those early stages, as you think about the cheat codes, the ones that really, really start to need some play is pausing and getting some rest, making sure that you're playing and doing those things that bring you joy and are actually coping mechanisms. So those are ways that you let off your stress. So making sure that you're maintaining those in that space. Community is huge in this space as well. Making sure you're keeping that community around you that can support you and cheer you along. And then growth is foundational at all stages, but making sure you have an understanding on what's going on the inside, as well as an understanding on your career goals. So thinking about the earlier conversation about mentorship, this falls into that as well. The mid stages is where that early exhaustion starts to turn real chronic. You start to really pull away and feel like overwhelmed. You might start to get more cynical and feeling of detachment. Also, what you start to see in the middle stages is that There could be an overuse in the negative coping mechanisms, which those are things like alcohol, cannabis, so on and so forth. So in those middle stages, rest is at an all-time high, the need to replenish and let your brain breathe. Also, growth starts to really peak up. So if you're not already in therapy, absolutely getting into it. It is a wonderful resource that is available and deserved by all. So going into therapy, starting to journal and recognize how are those symptoms and signs showing up? How are you feeling? Especially if you're not used to recognizing it and acknowledging it. Community is huge, and making sure those individuals are around you that support you and reinforce you and to fill your cup. And then play, of course, you always need things that bring you joy. This is where you may start to need your booster, because this is where negative self-talk can start coming, because the work could be piling up, because you're not as productive in the amount of time that you're spending, because your level of energy is quickly depleting. So you might need that booster to tell yourself that this is actually what you need. In the later stages, you'll see that's where we start to see signs of closer to depression and sometimes acute depression, which means you are able to get joy in other parts of your life, while chronic depression, that is a more all-encompassing feeling. But you can start to feel very empty and like nothing really matters. This can also be the space where PTSD-like symptoms can show up within burnout. Personally, I had that wonderful pit in my stomach when I would hear Outlook and finding out that this was all attached. So those later stages are intense, but burnout is reversible. And so if you're finding yourself in those later stages where things are feeling pointless, that's deep growth. This is where I talked about cheat codes might make it a little harder for a period of time. So that's the deep work in a therapy. That's the deep work in introspection. That's the deep work in self-awareness and being real and being honest with yourself and paying attention to what those around you that love you are actually saying. Very often those around you can see how things are showing up before you may even see it. Rest is always needed. So finding your way to let your brain breathe. So whether you want to do a float tank, and that is a way that you can finally start to decompress. If you need to do active meditation, for me, it was finding my way by flying kites when I couldn't sit still with Headspace. So finding your way to let yourself rest, even if you have to be creative with it. Community is always huge, but community is very important in like a safe community. You may be going through some real changes inside. And so having those that you can really trust with your emotions that will be there, support you, and understand and recognize that you're processing and you're human. And then play, wanting to find those ways that bring you joy, those things that bring you sparks, because you really need it. And this, you will need a booster. Sometimes that booster will take you to taking a short-term disability leave. Sometimes that booster will take you to recognizing that the path that you are on is not the path that you would like to continue. So that late stage, this is an idea, but growth is really strong in that pillar. So that was a lot. 15 minutes goes fast, but really, are you ready to practice? Because every day is a time to practice. And so with Hooky, we actually have an official Hooky Day. It is it's an official skip day for mental well-being, and it's next Tuesday. We do it right before the holidays, so you can really start to replenish your energy before it. This is a day really just to take the time, repurpose it for yourself. So if you visit hookywellness.com, you can sign up, download the prep guide that gives you an out-of-office checklist, gives you templates for your messages, as well as gives you 101 ways to play hooky and to fill your free time with freedom. As well as you can learn more about support for burnout relief for you and your team. So hopefully that was a quick overview of some cheat codes that you can use to play hooky and to find some burnout relief.
Thank you, Erayna. Burnout it's such a relevant topic in our lives today. But thank you so much for that. And this brings us to the end of day one of the summit. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you will be here back tomorrow for day two. We will have more amazing sessions and our incredibly inspiring keynotes. I really hope you will join us at 1 p.m. tomorrow for Leslie Feinstein's keynote, as she will be sharing some super special news that we've been working very hard to keep under wraps. So I hope you will see you there. And all right, with that, thank you and good night.